Bug exterminators of Reddit, what was your "we gonna need a bigger boat" moment? Spent the summer between high school and college working for a local, family-run, exterminating company. Nice gig, residential treatments during the day, mosquito fogging at night, and the occasional dairy farm treated for flies and rats. One day I'm at one of these dairy farms and enter the milking parlor to spray and set up traps. See a rather large cat across the parlor from the front door. Good for him, I think, growing fat, eating rodents and whatever else he's caught over the years. I enter the parlor and the cat moves, and I realize the cat is not a cat, but a rat, easily the size of a 12-15 pound feline, and running down a drainage pipe. Decided that I did not want to be a sacrifice to the Rat King that day and opted out of there fast. Rats, we're the rats. We stalk at night. We hunt at night. We're the rats. I am the rat. That makes all of the rules. Let's see what kind of trouble we can get ourselves into. Pulled back insulation in a crawl space to track termite damage. About 100 baby juvenile cottonmouths came out from where the dry vent wasn't hooked up properly, keeping them nice and warm and moist in the insulation as fall approached. I'm only a termite exterminator. Got out that crawl space quicker than lightning. To this day I'm sure the termites and snakes are living under there happily ever after. For those who don't know, cottonmouths are extremely venomous snakes that are known to have possibly lethal bites. Got called out to a house that had a roach problem. So I walk in the house and I crap you not, you could barely see the color of the walls and ceiling for all the roaches. It was literally raining roaches from the ceiling. The people inside just sitting around like it's just a normal Monday and laughing about catching roaches falling from the ceiling. Without a doubt the most disgusting thing I've encountered. Indeed, the only way to deal with that is to napalm the entire house. I worked at a gas station on overnights and asked my manager to do something about the spider infestation. I hate spiders, and it was so bad customers started going to other places because these big spiders would build webs over the door in the span of 40 minutes between customers. Plus the entire awning and overhang was just a mess of webs and hanging spider nests. So she goes out and buys some spray, and it barely does anything. So she goes and buys a bunch of spray, and is standing outside one day just spraying the awnings and overhang, the doors, air pump, Anyways, there was this large crack in the siding, so she stuck the spray nozzle inside and started spraying. I'd have died. What followed was so bad, I probably would have died from terror. The way she described it, after the screaming stopped and the color came back, was as if someone turned a great big faucet on. Hundreds of spiders just came pouring out like water. Must have been a ton of nests inside there. Burn the gas station down, just in case. Not an exterminator. Frick it, since we're all just sharing our worst anyway. My apartment's got an indoor trash chute under the kitchen sink. It has a habit of falling open by itself, and pests crawl up and into our house from it. Roaches, the works. We'd been fighting them for weeks. Eventually 17-year-old me comes up with the brilliant plan of doing a seal. I used trash bags and some strong butt tape to make an airtight seal around the offending chute. I do 3 layers of magic. The barrier works. The roaches couldn't cross into our realm from theirs. 3 years later we start finding small dead roaches in the kitchen. Maybe one in the toilet. I've forgotten all about the dark forces I banished years ago, and I'm mystified. The bodies start getting bigger as the weeks pass. Eventually we start finding live specimens and they're pretty large. I finally twig that perhaps the ancient seal has been breached. I get on down to the compartment under the sink and open it up. Horror. The roaches had slowly bitten through the seals and ended up breeding within the layers of the seal. Eventually they got through the final seal, and as the breach grew wider, larger and more vicious bugs got through. I could see them roiling and seething in a bunch within the plastic. I realized what a huge mistake I made all those years ago, and now the evil was back for me. I ended up bringing in some industrial strength pesticide and fighting through the outer guard to get to the breach. I couldn't let any survivors pass me, or it would get into the house. I pushed a tube into the breach and made a temporary seal around it with more tape, and let loose with the pesticide. I could hear the roaches scrambling in the plastic, getting more hectic as they started to die. The fighting continued as I was still rounding up survivors who escaped and putting them down while the pesticide did its work. Once I heard nothing from the seal, I tore it down. It was carnage. Beyond disgusting. That motivated us to tear that crap out and get a new, roach-proof chute installed. And I got an idea for a fantasy setting for my creative work. The Ancient Seal. Loved it. Horrifying as heck though. We have a problem with Japanese beetles. Like, a big one. I bought a trap after seeing 10 or 20 hanging out on my roses. But then the trap was completely full within an hour. We're talking thousands of beetles caught in just an hour. So I go investigate, surely they didn't all come from my roses, right? So I start checking my trees, a few here and there until I get to this crepe myrtle at the very edge of the yard. It was literally covered in fricking beetles. As in, the beetles were fricking. Hundreds of thousands of beetles. My dad decided the thing to do was to shake the tree and scare them off. That was the worst idea. Beetles rained from the heavens. The sky was dark and swirling with beetles. They covered me, even though I had retreated to a safe distance, sticking in my hair, crawling in my clothes. Dad stopped, dropped and rolled. As these beetles were stirred into action, so were all of the beetles from all of the trees beyond. It was Armageddon. I was not convinced I would survive this. A few days later, Dad, dressed in a makeshift hazmat suit, went out and doused every tree with the most toxic bug killer he could find. Even now, weeks later, we have to pick the stiff corpses of beetles out of our dog's fur whenever he comes inside. I still have nightmares. Frick Japanese beetles. I'm a weirdo who isn't an exterminator, but as a hobby I study pest control and entomology. The beetle traps you're talking about actually can and do attract new ones to the trap. So you probably just infested yourself even more. Not an exterminator, but this happened to a friend of mine in college. He was in a frat and actually lived in the frat house. During one of the parties they threw a water pipe was broken. They didn't stop the party or really even act like it happened, so there was just water all over the place. Eventually they just shut off the water but didn't call any kind of plumber cleaner for the water that was probably an inch deep on the floor. Instead they set up little stepping stones to make it out the front door without getting in the water. However, because there was so much stagnant water just sitting around, mosquitoes were breeding like crazy. I crap you not, you couldn't be in the house for more than 5 minutes without getting 50 mosquito bites. The worst place I've ever been. They were eventually kicked out of the house when the frat advisor saw what happened, called the landlord, and the landlord had seen what happened. Yep, sounds like college. Arachnophobia warning. My husband and his first wife had a spider infestation in their backyard one summer. It started with spiders in their cedar hedges. A few. They knew they were in trouble when the entire hedge turned white from the webs. My husband goes to the hardware store and gets some methalion, dons a hazmat suit and goes outside to start spraying. As he sprays, the cedars start to shake. The entire 6 feet high hedge is shaking. Spiders start dropping on him, and he drops the methalion and runs. A week later all the grass is now white too. He calls 2 different exterminators, who say, "Frick this," but also tell him to call the Ministry of Natural Resources. Resource officer comes out, looks, explains what the spiders are. I don't recall the species, but they were big, and apparently the eggs can lay in gestation for decades, waiting for exactly the right environment. Apparently they like to lay nests in wood. Being the Ministry of Natural Resources, they don't offer to kill the spiders. Natch. He is out of options, and has to wait until the frost kills all of these bastards. In Canada, frost comes usually October-ish. So frost comes. Never has he been so thrilled to greet a Canadian winter. Next spring he calls his buddy, kind of a roughneck, to help him dismantle the woodshed in the back of the yard, which is assumed to be the nesting grounds. As my husband and his then wife cower inside, they watch out the kitchen door as Buddy tears down to the shed to burn at his farm. The shed's rafters are covered in what looks like pillows, clouds, foam. All the rafters are positively bathed in spider eggs. Buddy dismantles the shed, puts it in his trailer and takes all the wood, the nests, to the farm for cremation. Buddy also has a terrific time going up to the window and taunting them with the rafters. As an epilogue, just when they think this nightmare is over, one spring day they have a nice bath, and as they get out of the tub there is a large spider, the same species, on the outside of the tub. He crushes it with a CD case. It is so large it made a crunch. That must have been the last one, as they never returned. Freaking horror show. TL. DR. Entire backyard is bathed in spiders. No help available. Have to wait for winter to kill them off. Turns out the old wooden shed was the breeding ground. Wow, they actually burned down the building to get rid of the spiders. Bedbugs. They're called bedbugs for a reason. Choosing to live in the tufts fold seams of your bed to be close to the blood meal while you sleep. In high infestations they'll resort to adjacent furniture. Furthermore, the windowsill, ceiling, baseboards, closet, not ideal places to hide, but will when the ideal areas are overcrowded. I visit an apartment unit for an inspection and the lady opens the door. From the doorway I see bedbugs around the door frame, ceiling, and crawling on her blouse and neck. She's oblivious to the problem due to mental health issues in low-income housing. I told the landlord this would be a challenge to say the least. The people of the 1800s would burn their mattresses and furniture because bedbugs. That's where metal bed frames came from. That crap is horrifying. Here's another one I just thought of. Residents moved out on us without paying rent, which is what happens every single time. We go to check out the trailer expecting the worst. Basically what you saw in my last post. It's not exactly clean, but it's not trashed either. No power, so it's dark and hot. But my co-worker and I go through the trailer front to back, and I even said to her, I can't believe it's not trashed. This isn't bad at all. We make our way back towards the door and she starts screaming, what the frick, and totally freaking out. I am still in the dark inside and she jumps outside in the sun and I see it, her legs are black. I mean freaking absolutely covered in fleas. Then it hits me. I had pants on and I pulled my pants up and they were all over me too. We ran back to the shop and blew ourselves off with blowers, and the shop even had fleas for a week after that. A shop that is nothing but concrete. We had fleas once. One day nothing, then the next you're completely taken over by these dang things. Beekeeper. But most of us are somehow in the wasp removal business too. Mentor thought he saw a small hornet's nest and took about the precautions of making a dainty wasp trap out of vinegar in an old Sprite bottle. Upon realizing the hellacious magnitude of those little suckers, he filled an outdoor vac with dishwater, set the hose under his gutter, and set the thing to suck. He's already emptied out 3 gallons of hornets. Bye. Buttholes. She's gone from suck to blow. Not a bug exterminator, but the first apartment I ever got after college I now refer to as shithole. There were lots of off things about shithole, like how people like to break my apartment's windows, or how, upon move-in, the dishwasher turned out to be just for show and inoperable. Shithole was street level. The basement level, which I discovered via a crawlspace door hanging open into the alleyway that led to the washer-dryer area, was filled with abandoned construction supplies. To the brim, as in, old paint and wooden screws toppling out of the crawl space. I knew it was a cesspool. I knew pests probably lived there. I figured raccoons, and decided to get on the lookout for a new apartment. The day of my visit, the day I need to pack all my stuff. I'm showering in the 2x2 shower stall, and something touches my feet. It's red, with long crooked antennas, but it's small. Just as I kick it off, 3 more appear. Baby German cockroaches have hatched in the drain of my shower stall. They're crawling up through the drain and onto my feet, up my legs, up the walls. Within seconds they're everywhere. I ran out of the bathroom, still wet and soapy, and slammed the door. Nope. This is shithole, and no door fits its frame. The cockroaches come bursting out through the crack underneath it. I run to the bedroom, shampoo in my hair, my body wetting the whole floor behind me, and shake my boyfriend awake. Before I can even tell him what's happening, there's a mew down the hall. My cat had been in the bathroom while I showered. Frick. I run back, will myself to open the bathroom door, where roaches are still scampering under the cracks and desperate mew mew sounds are emanating. I open it. The roaches are climbing the mirror. They are in the shower curtain. I find my cat, a baby roach on his side, one in his whiskers, and flick them off, grabbing him and carrying him outside. So there we sat, outside our apartment, the 3 of us trying to figure out what to do at this point. All we want is to get out of shithole, and now every item we own is infested. Now no matter what we do, shithole will follow us, and it'll screw not just us, but our new neighbors, our new neighborhood. 2. We googled it. We put everything we owned in an XXL black double thick garbage bag meant for yard work from Home Depot. We filled each bag with pesticide. We moved the bags to our new apartment and let them sit out on the patio for 2 days. We slept on wood floors. We bought all new groceries. We bought 2 new towels. 2 days pass. We open the bags and nothing moves. We wash all the clothes linens. I haven't seen a cockroach since. But frick that apartment. Frick you. Shithole. May you burn to the ground. Good lord. I mean, at least you didn't slip while fleeing the scourge. I was sitting at the dinner table with my family last August and there were lots of wasps around. I hate these suckers to their tiny chitin cores. What was even more suspicious was that they kept coming from underneath the table all the time. I also have the habit of rocking with my chair by pushing myself away from the underside of the table. The moment my legs touched the underside, I felt a cracking followed by a buzzing and stinging pain. Well, turns out these flying fricks decided that beneath our dinner table was cozy enough to nest. The moment I went under the table to see how big the nest was can only be compared to this on scene where Ripley meets the alien when it comes out from the shadows. And this is why I always check under a picnic table before I sit down. Try not to use public restrooms at parks. And flip the toilet seat up and back down to make sure there aren't bugs on or under the seat when I defecate. A hoarder type older lady passed away and we were called over because of bedbugs. Those insidious little suckers were everywhere. The top and bottom of her old mattress were nearly painted black from digested blood stains and the smell was awful. We flipped the mattress after using a bedbug vacuum only to find a layer of bedbug skins several inches deep all on the floor. Literally tens or hundreds of thousands of bedbug skins. They were in the walls, the outlets, books, shoes, and even inside the home phone. Even the door frame to her apartment had bedbugs in the hinges and under the doormat. That job took a while, lol, and unfortunately I've done a few that have been nearly as bad. I've done roach jobs in the basement of complexes where the trash compactors are and seeing thousands of roaches or massive mice nests with thick layers of turds permeating from under fridges. Nothing gives me more of the creeps than bedbugs. Obligatory, I'm not an exterminator, but my dad and stepmom held their wedding at our house. They wanted something small, close family and close friends only. Basically like an average get together with cake and a ceremony. They got Italian food catered and it was overall an amazing time. Fast forward to maybe 2 or 3 days after, I was cleaning up the last of the mess from the party and I go to take the garbage out. There are a handful of flies around the garbage, but I think nothing of it because, well, it is trash. After all, I had 2 bags of garbage in my hands, so I kinda have to kick the garbage can open. I kick it open, it flings open, and there is a sea of maggots. We're talking in the tens of thousands at the very least, maybe hundreds. I couldn't see any garbage beneath them. I had kicked it open with such force that many of them had flung out and onto me. I was wearing crappy old navy flip-flops and oversized basketball shorts. Some actually flew up the leg of my pants from the kick and onto my bare feet. I dropped everything and screamed as loud as I've ever screamed before. I went into the driveway to shake out my shorts, and I even started crying a bit. I have an incredible fear of maggots and this experience had made it 10 times as horrible to me. My dad and stepmom got home from a movie and I was having my little meltdown in the driveway. He asked what was wrong and I told him. He went to go see for himself. I heard a scream, and he ran back to the garage. I went inside to cool down a bit. He came back in 15 minutes visibly shaken. I asked him what he ended up doing and he said, I just went to the garage, got all the wasp, ant, spider, and snake killing chemicals as I could, opened up the garbage with my eyes closed, and unloaded every single can. What had happened was that we had so much meat left over from the catering order, chicken parmesan, Italian sausage, etc., that we had to throw it all away, in the garbage. This was during July in Texas, so the meat had been rotting in the dry 103-degree heat for an entire day or 2. I'm feeling anxious now. Walked into a house for a roach startup. The freaking walls moved. They were in the dressers, beds, closets, furniture, not to mention common areas like the kitchen and baths. Heck, they were in the walls. The place was an old rundown 5000 plus SQFT nightmare that I had to clear out single-handedly. 3 months of weekly 2-hour services and I got things under control. Then the rat problem started. I wasn't too heartbroken when the service was cancelled for non-payment. There's a certain point when arson becomes a public service. In college I lived in an apartment that had a porch. Above us was another unit with a balcony over our porch. The guys above us were too lazy to take trash out in the winter, so they'd just put the trash bags on the balcony and they sit there frozen until they took them all to the dumpster. So once spring rolled around, this old garbage thawed out and caught the attention of some critters. This was unknown to us until we were sitting on the porch and maggots literally start raining through the deck planks from above. That was some true nightmare crap. And I thought it was bad when our upstairs neighbors would empty their ashtrays on us our patio. I worked for my uncle's extermination business during the summers, busy season, for about 10 years. It's the roaches. It's always the fricking roaches. He's stopped taking the calls since. Too much hassle and rework. Anyways, we're up on this call at like an old folks independent living building. It's like a nursing home, but they have a lot more freedom and less close-up care. They had said the problem was bad on the phone, but to be fair we hear that crap all the time and half the time it's just one spider or a wasp nest in the doghouse and not really that bad. So we go in and check it out, and there are roaches. Freaking everywhere. They're in the kitchen. They're in the walls. They're in the ceiling tiles. Everywhere. It was freaking nasty. So we give them the rundown and basically tell them it's gonna be expensive AF and that the residents will have to leave their apartments in waves as we bomb the place. Aerosol cans filled with the pesticides. They agree because basically every other company in the area wouldn't touch this place with a 10 featuring pole. So we go in waves every day for the next week, bombing everything. I don't even know how many canisters we used. That incident alone was more than the rest of the summers I worked combined. The nasty part though was the freaking cleanup. God, it makes me wanna gag just thinking of it. We would take off a ceiling tile and they would just freaking fall out by the hundreds. We literally filled trash bags with dead roaches. It was in pounds and pounds of dead roaches. And it smelled like freaking death. Overall it took a couple of months of repeat visits. But nothing will ever match that first treatment. God, it was awful. We should have just skipped it. It was so much stress and honestly even though the money was good it wasn't worth it. I just felt bad for all the old folks living there. They just got a crap deal with bugs and it seemed like half of them didn't even have someone that gave two shoots about them. It was a fun job, but frick roaches. It was a fun job. I don't believe you. Not a bug exterminator, but I am a beekeeper. A couple days ago I was removing a hive for an old pea farmer. He said it was on the second story of his house. No big deal, right? We use large ladders and tear out hives all the time without problems. Boy, was I wrong. I get there and realize the actual roof is much taller than I expected. Okay, whatever. I can do this. Somehow we get the idea of putting a 16-foot ladder in the bucket of his tractor, which he raises as high as he can, and I lean the ladder against where the hive is. I get about halfway up the ladder before realizing how stupid this idea was, as I couldn't bring any tools. No smoke equals very angry bees, and it felt like the slightest wrong move would make me fall. I foolishly kept going anyway, though, and quickly met face to face with a stupidly large number of angry bees which were actually getting to me. Ankles. Wrists were uncovered from pulling my suit as I crawled up the ladder, so the ladder isn't going to cut it, and the hive was very much deep in there. Fine. Alright. I get some scaffolding and my dad offers to help me. We get set up and give the hive some smoke, make them less likely to freak out, and start trying to open up the siding of the house. After a little work we get it open to reveal an enormous amount of comb, honey, bees, and, surprise surprise, ants. Lots of them. All in all, I'll never be climbing that high to remove a beehive again. Not an exterminator, but we had a horrible infestation of gypsy moth caterpillars last year. It was like walking into a horror movie every time I was outside of the house. We couldn't use the patio because it would just be covered with the things, and as we walked, we'd be squishing them underfoot. The memory of that squishy pop combo under my heel is never going to go away. They stripped the trees of leaves but thankfully didn't kill any. I then started raising Muscovy ducks again, had them a few years back, who eat anything that moves. So even though my neighbors are infested, my yard is gypsy moth caterpillar free. I'm not an exterminator, but I have a story that I think is relevant. I'd woken up to go to the bathroom, so I'm taking a dump and suddenly, a spider almost the size of a tarantula runs from under me to the door, basically keeping me in with it. I clean up as fast as I can and get ready to try and kill it, which usually for me is throwing a towel on a spider if it's on the ground and stomping on it. I go to pick up the towel and the spider, after 5 or 6 stomps, is still alive and runs from under the towel to the corner of the door. I throw another towel down and stomp again 5 or 6 more times. Again, it's still alive and I end up running to the bathtub to avoid it. It ends up running round the back of the bathtub. I run out the door and my niece ends up killing it months later when it happens to show up on the stairs. Extra upvotes if your niece that killed it was about 6 or 7 and did without batting an eye. I was once given one of those freestanding stoves to take up to the cabin at the deer lease. They didn't tell me there was a pan of some grease or something left in it. This thing sat in the garage for a few weeks until I started notice something kind of smelling funny, and I noticed flies in the garage. After some searching I open the oven door and a freaking cloud of flies comes pouring out along with a bunch of stink. There was a freaking horror show in that oven. Dead flies and maggot casings everywhere. Nope. Straight up threw it out. It was kind of old anyways. Should have thrown a log in it and lit it. Or just a ton of charcoal and lighter fluid. Not an exterminator, but once in college my roommate called a meeting to address a mouse problem. Sure, I'd seen one when coming back from the library once or twice, but what's the big deal? So we banded together and got some sticky traps. We caught 4 the first night, but nothing changed. We still saw them from time to time. So we moved next month's rent into an escrow, hired a lawyer to write our landlord and inform him that the apartment was inhabitable in its current state. He reluctantly paid for an exterminator. You really wanna start this relationship off on the wrong foot. How this was the end of November and we moved in October. The exterminator laid hundreds of traps. It was Fort Knox in that apartment. We caught over 40 mice that December. 1 double kill, 2 mice, 1 sticky trap. Both still alive. Worst part was, no one saw the exterminator lay down the traps, and although he told us he'd be back in 2 weeks to assess, we never saw him again. Obviously, the landlord wasn't paying for him twice. I came home from the library one night to find an impromptu roommate meeting. Turns out, flies laid eggs in one of the mouse carcasses behind the fridge, so now we had a fly problem. Went out to the dollar store and got a 4-pack of fly sweaters. It was a long battle, but we took no casualties. Hundreds of flies met their maker that day. Slightly unrelated but in the same apartment. I went to the kitchen one morning to make breakfast and there was a squirrel rustling around in the garbage. This mother sucker chewed a hole in the screen window and was just feasting. Later that week a frat bro of mine brought over his new 4 feet blow dart only to break down and cry after impaling a squirrel under my direction. I felt bad that I pushed him to commit murder, but it had to be done. Freaking vermin. I have a mouse zapper. I forgot to check it and blick. I now check regularly. When I lived in Oklahoma, every year around fall, the crickets would come out in droves. You would find them and everything. When they died in mounds and it smelled like pure death and trash. It was awful. Worst part though is they would get in your room and hide and then all of a sudden start their chirping and it's loud. Plus you can't find their little asses because they stop chirping when you start moving around hunting them. I became an expert cricket hunter, moving very swiftly to isolate where they were just so I could get some sleep. I feed my chameleon crickets and they get out of his cage all the time. Hate them. Can't imagine having to deal with that many though. I work for a pest control company in Florida, but I work in the office so I never see anything firsthand. I do have second-hand stories from technicians and managers that make me so glad that I only have to answer the phones, as well as a horror story from before I even worked there. A year before, almost to the date of me working there, I moved into my first apartment on my own with a friend. We were both excited to get out of our parents' houses and it was a beautiful unit, right next to a nice pond that you can see from the porch. When we moved in, we saw a roach or 2 but figured it wasn't a big deal and we'd get the apartment's pest company to come out and take care of it. Well, the roach issue progressively got worse. I will never forget the time that my roommate was cleaning the apartment. There was a square end table that was underneath the breakfast bar on the other side of the kitchen. He moved it in order to vacuum that space to see a little square of roaches the same shape as the end table hiding out. He vacuumed them all up rather quickly, but we immediately called the office. From there it was just a blame game of the office saying that it was our fault, telling other units when they had roaches that it was because we gave it to them, and told us we owed $1,000 to them for the condition we left the unit in. Needless to say, for that, we ended up throwing away most of our art they nested in the frames and furniture for fear of bringing them with us. I started working for the pest company around the time we moved out and got a monthly service immediately. We never saw one again. I will say that corporate apartments are the little worst and I advise living anywhere else if at all possible. I have stories of property managers trying to get someone to a unit for a roach flea bed bug infestation that they need taken care of ASAP because they have a move-in that weekend. But they literally do not care as long as they can keep the resident flow going. Here are some tech experiences though. I had one tell me about how he entered a unit that had German roaches. The resident was baffled and questioning why they were having such an issue. He went into the kitchen to inspect, opened up the silverware drawer to find a chicken bone with a couple dozen roaches feeding on it. Roach vacuums are a thing. Rodent infestations, finding dead people, having guns pointed in your face. Being an exterminator is no joke. Not an exterminator, but I do have a story that fits your criteria. So during the summer I work at a Jewish camp that's placed in a community center. It has a pool, playground and all that fun stuff for the kids. So one day I get called over by one of my coworkers while I was exiting the restroom to a sewage drain in our outside eating area. I come over and he tells me that a black widow was in the drain and along with it an egg. And since the kids we watching are 3 8-year-olds, this won't stand. We spray the spider down with Raid, but this makes the egg hatch and smaller spiders are now crawling up the pipe. We whip out the hose and blast it with water for 20 minutes as to make sure there are no survivors. Job's done, right? No. One of the campers comes up and tells us they saw another black widow near the pool. Now our pool area has a wall with holes in them that are used to drain water out of the other side of the wall. Well, the spider was in one of those holes. We go over with the rail and spray it down until we find that every hole had spiders and eggs. Some with roaches that spilled out, finding more and more spiders as we go. We ended up closing that area off for the swim meet later that day because we didn't know what other areas these spiders were in. I don't know what happened after that. We told the director and we never saw an exterminator come by or anything, but we now know that that crap is infested. Not an exterminator, but I remember when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my mom and I would go outside at night to look at the stars. We live in a valley in paradise, so there's almost no light pollution and you can see the stars so clearly. But one night I was standing under our mango tree and all of a sudden my legs start to feel like they're on fire. Freaking fire. Ants. They crawled up all the way up past my knees. My legs were covered with ants and I started screaming bloody murder and my mom sprayed me down with the hose. This isn't even the last time something like this has happened to me. I once was playing soccer with some kids in Costa Rica and again I stood right on a ant colony and just got freaking wrecked up to my knees. And then like a year or 2 ago I'm finally off to college, but I come home to visit and the fire ants have returned. And guess WHO stepped on the anthill again? I don't even know if an exterminator can help us with something like this, but it's not my problem anymore. The only way I can even think positively about this is that at least I'm only 5 feet 3 inches and so I have less body mass for them to destroy. 2 things. One was a residence. I refused to work residential anymore, where the guy said he might have bed bugs. His couch and 2 beds in the house were literally moving. He was elderly, so I tried to give him as much information as possible and provide tips to make it as cheap as possible. Bed bug jobs are expensive. The treatment is expensive. The laundering of clothes and bedding is expensive because no one wants to do that crap in your own home. So his daughter showed up and I told her straight what it was going to cost and that if it were my house it'd get sheets of plastic and duct tape. Tape up the mattresses and box springs and couch and throw it away. Then gave them a prep list on how to properly prepare for a treatment to lessen the likelihood of a secondary treatment resurgence. For your information, most companies give a 30-day guarantee on bed bugs. If you get a treatment for the next 30 days, you become Sherlock frickin' Holmes and make sure there isn't a bed bug in sight. My company charges $750 a room, I believe, residentially. My other was an account I got at a fast food restaurant. We were battling the roach issue for months. Generally I can get rid of roaches after a month or two if it's really bad. This place won't let up. So they told us they were gutting the place for a remodel. They removed the walls and it was literally moving. On average, when I treat for roaches, I'll use anywhere from 2 packs, 4 tubes of roach bait, to a case, 5 packs of bait, for a heavy infestation, and try to narrow down hot spots and hit those during the following treatments. Me and a manager put 40 cases of bait in this place. Good lord, it was bad. Once all the roaches were dead, we cleared it and they were free to resume construction. They didn't see a roach again after that. It was pretty intense. I work in a major city doing commercial only pest control, and my goal is to go in and eliminate issues as quick as I can so that I can just go in and inspect and take it easy for the most part. When you're in an old city with old buildings, things will get in. But it's so much easier to deal with the occasional mouse or roach than doing a half-assed job and battle issues every time you walk into an account. I'm not an exterminator, but once I was taking out the trash at a school. It was outside and it was very heavy, so once me and my mother squirmed it out of the can, a little bit fell out of the can and there was a plastic cup with a bunch of weird brownish liquid in it, and at the time I thought there were seeds in the liquid. Turns out they were maggots and several more fell out of the bag onto my hands. It was horrible, man. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.